Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control. As this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Cardinals, next, Arizona, next, ARZ, next, AZ, next, Redbirds. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Arizona Cardinals. And what an offseason it was for these Arizona Cardinals. A lot has transpired since the end of the 2018 regular season. A lot of change has taken place in Arizona. It starts at the head coaching position. A lot of people were up in arms about the lack of opportunity given to ex-head coach Steve Wilks. One and done in Arizona. A lot of fire was really put at the feet of general manager Steve Keim. I thought he handled the situation as best as one possibly could with a lot of the things that were going on. Obviously, he has to get this thing right because of all of the things that have taken place. If this doesn't work, and obviously you hire and fire a coach, you're the one that picked the guy last year, then you move on from him after 1 year, that's on you. Also, you draft a quarterback last year in the first round. As a matter of fact, you'll move up in the draft to select him at number 10 overall, only to give him 1 year of service in Arizona before deciding he's not the guy. Why? Because you hire a new coach in Cliff Kingsbury. I've been a huge, staunch supporter of Cliff Kingsbury being the guy in Arizona. It's well documented. As a matter of fact, if you haven't listened to the Louie Tee Network podcast, what are you waiting on? Louie Tee Network podcast available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website LouieTeeNetwork.net. I talked profusively about Cliff Kingsbury and the impact that he would have for the Arizona Cardinals. I even made a video talking about how I think he can turn it around in Arizona, but he's going to need the right guy at quarterback. And so there was a lot of rumors swirling, and everybody went back to the October video of Cliff Kingsbury saying, if I was an NFL team and I had the number 1 pick, I'd take Kyler Murray. And that started all of the rumors and all of the finger pointing. And so, again, it was really interesting how this thing all unfolded and the dynamics of the situation. But when it was all said and done, Josh Rosen ultimately traded, and there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of talking. I don't think there was ever any real decision to be made here. I think the guy all along was Kyler Murray. They didn't want to show their hand. They didn't want to tell everyone what they were going to do. They tried to keep it a secret, but it was the worst kept secret in this entire draft. Everyone knew that Kyler Murray was the guy. There was a little bit of a doubt maybe cast on the pick, number 1 overall going into the draft. But I think if you had been thinking like I did, and I made a video probably as early as anyone made on YouTube at least, talking about the fact that they were going to select Kyler Murray. I think a lot of people really didn't get really onto that train until I'd say early March, maybe late February. I was on that train very early in the process, like early February, when I kind of started connecting dots. But that's nor here nor there. The bottom line was that's the only pick in the draft that everyone knew the Arizona Cardinals were going to select. They were a really bad football team, bad enough to have the number 1 pick in the draft. And Steve Keim needed to have a big draft. Let's face it, if you're going to trade Josh Rosen, if you're going to pick a new coach, if you're going to fire the guy you had in there last year, if you're going to trade away the quarterback you had in here last year as a first-round pick after 1 year, you're going to bring all new guys in here, you need to revamp this thing the right way. I thought they had some really good moves in the offseason. And this entire roster needed a makeover. The offensive line was dreadful last year. The wide receiver position was lackluster. You look around this football team, there just wasn't enough, period. And you didn't have to say what position. It just wasn't enough, period. And so much like Buffalo, and I've talked very glowingly about the Buffalo Bills offseason and what Brandon Beane has done for the Bills. I feel the same way about what Steve Keim did in this offseason. Now, again, I don't know if it's going to be enough to make the postseason, but we've seen teams with a new head coach that has a little bit of juice offensively come in and change the fortunes of a team right away. We saw it with Sean McVay in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and they won the division, won a playoff game, went to hosted a home playoff game, lost in the first round, but nonetheless won the division after being one of the worst teams in the league. And a lot of questions about Jared Goff. You look at the Bears, Mitchell Trubisky, he comes in. It's not great in his first year under John Fox. They bring in a new head coach, and Matt Nagy tears it up. They win the division. So I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen here, but I think there are going to be some very positive changes in year one to give Cardinals fans a ton of hope. And I think some of that needs to be put in the lap of General Manager Steve Keim, because this draft right here is phenomenal, and he needed this. He needed this draft to be special, and I think it is exactly that. Let's look at what the Cardinals were able to do to help refurbish and re-shine this complete roster. They needed an overhaul. They got it in the offseason with this draft and free agency. We start in the first round, obviously first pick overall in this draft, quarterback out of Oklahoma. Second year in a row an Oklahoma quarterback has went number one overall in the NFL draft. Kyler Murray is the selection to get this draft underway. So there's really no real need for a breakdown here. I've already done it, obviously. If you haven't checked out my series, Draft Prospects 101 series prior to the draft, I got to as many prospects as I could with film breakdown. That's where you need to go if you're looking for an extensive breakdown of Kyler Murray. I've already done that, and I'm going to do that here. Everyone knows that Kyler Murray was the most intriguing quarterback. I won't say he was the best. I think he was the best. But he was the most intriguing quarterback in this draft class. The ability to run and be mobile but still throw the football anywhere on the field with velocity, and just the dynamic ability that he brings to the table, I think it's unmatched with any one particular player at the quarterback position. And so that intrigue, along with the ability to really flourish in this air raid attack run by Cliff Kingsbury, and also looking at what the landscape of the league is now with the, I won't say the advent, but the addition of RPOs in the league now and how prevalent they've become. A guy like Kyler Murray will be able to run those types of things very effectively. You look at David Johnson in the backfield, you look at Larry Legend and Christian Kirk, and now all the pieces that you add at the wide receiver position. You added some guys at tight end as well, and all of a sudden now it's a very different looking offense. You still need the protection up front. You're hoping that 5 guys can gel and mesh together to give him the type of protection he needs. But here's the thing. If you're going to have an offensive line that maybe struggles or maybe isn't where you need them to be quite yet, what's a better remedy for that than a guy that can move and have mobile legs that you can move the pocket with, that can escape the pocket if things break down and make something happen with his legs. So you add a guy like Kyler Murray, and I think this is a match made in heaven. I think this was the right move to make. Now, again, if this doesn't work, people will get fired. It's really simple. If this does not work, people are going to get fired. But I love the opportunity here that you have with Kyler Murray as your quarterback moving forward in the first round, first overall selection. Quarterback Kyler Murray, for me, obviously, is...
Hits one high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
So you start the draft off with the home run, and I'm going to talk about your needs here in a second, but my comp for him, if you didn't watch the video, was Russell Wilson. That's an easy comp. It's the closest thing you're going to get in today's NFL to Kyler Murray, but I really think he's a lot more explosive and dynamic as a runner than Russell Wilson ever has been. But in any event, with that size, arm talent, athleticism in one body, Russell Wilson is the closest you're going to get to Kyler Murray. So with that being said, we go to the second round. And this is where the draft, to me, really begun for the Arizona Cardinals. From this point forward, we knew what they were going to do at number 1. What were you going to do with the other 10 selections that you had in this draft? 11 altogether. It's a lot of picks, but you needed every single one of them. Again, this is a team looking to overhaul. And so this is where I thought their draft begun. Second round, 33rd overall selection. Defensive back out of Washington. Byron Murphy is the pick. So, all right, before we get to Byron Murphy and what he brings to the table, I want to first talk about the draft needs. And I did this for every team in the 2019 NFL draft. I looked at the roster and I looked at the team from a year ago and what they did in free agency and where did that leave them in terms of needs heading into the 2019 NFL draft. And look, for the Arizona Cardinals, you could have very well put up every single position on their football team and said, look, they need every single position. That's how destitute they were talent-wise last year. It was a mess. And when Steve Wilks was in over his head, I wasn't a fan of Steve Wilks being hired in the first place. So him getting fired, I never like to see a guy not get an opportunity to fix a situation that was messy when he got there, but that's nor here nor there. You look at this roster, they didn't have enough last year, period. Again, as I said earlier. So everything was on the table, but I put these in the order of importance going into the draft, and I usually only do 6, and so I couldn't do all 11 positions, but you look at the Cardinals roster, offensive line obviously was a mess last year. You just did not have enough in front of a rookie quarterback, in front of any quarterback, Sam Bradford, whomever was going to be under center. They didn't have enough protection. And so offensive line was a big need going into this draft. I don't think you necessarily addressed it the way that you could have, but you did some things in free agency. You feel a little bit more comfortable with what you have. You made a couple of moves later on in the draft. One a developmental move, one with a guy that I think could ultimately start for your football team moving forward. We'll see, but offensive line for me was a big need. Wide receiver. Look, Larry Legend is back again. And it seems like he won't go away, which is a great thing for you. But you definitely needed wide receiver help. You needed a complete overhaul of the wide receiver position. And I know I continue to use the word overhaul, but that's how bad this roster was a season ago. You needed a complete overhaul of the receiver position. And because Larry's not going to be around forever. Larry Legend is a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you're on borrowed time with him. At some point, he's going to say, you know what? I'm done. This was my last year. This was fun, but I'm done. And so you want to be prepared when that does finally take place. You didn't have enough at the receiver position. I think you really needed to go out and get legitimately 4 to 5 guys to compete at the receiver position. And you did that. You even did it in the offseason, getting a couple of guys, bringing in Kevin White as a guy that underachieved as a first-round pick. Maybe a fresh start for him is what he needs. You drafted a couple more guys. You added to the mix at the receiver position. Now I think you have a healthy competition at wide receiver to go along with Larry Legend and Christian Kirk. And so I love what you did in this draft, but that was a big need. Cornerback, look, before the Patrick Peterson suspension, cornerback was a need already. But I thought you had done a good job of getting Robert Alford and adding some pieces at the cornerback position to make yourself more competitive before the suspension. Now, with the suspension, it's even more imperative that you add a cornerback again. Patrick Peterson will be back. It's not like he was suspended for an entire year, but still, that suspension for a team that needed to get off to a good start for their confidence and psyche, that's a rough way to start off your 2019 NFL regular season. But cornerback was a need regardless of whether Patrick Peterson was going to be on the field or not. Edge rusher, that's a position that you went out and did some things in the offseason, most notably Terrell Suggs, T-Sizzle coming in here to give you a little bit of edge rushing help. Chandler Jones is your big money guy off the edge. He's continued to be stellar for you since coming over from New England in the trade. But you needed somebody opposite of him. You had Marcus Golden. He dealt with the injury after he tore his ACL. Hasn't really been the same guy. And obviously, you needed some help off the edge. You go out and get Terrell Suggs. He's going to offer you some edge rushing ability. He can still do it, even though he's 97 years old. But you still needed more guys. You still need more bodies. You still need more presence up front to get to the quarterback. Defensive line, thought you could add some guys and some bodies up front, some more pressure to the quarterback from the defensive line position. and also just guys that are stellar and stout in the run game as well. And in safety, again, Tyrann Mathieu moved on a couple of off seasons ago to Houston, and you got DJ Swearinger last year at the end of the season after the Redskins let him go on a surprise move. And so you've added some pieces there. Obviously, you have Budda Baker, but I think you could still add more depth at the safety position, and you ultimately did that in this draft and actually added some really good depth, as we'll talk about that later on in the draft. So the Cardinals did a really good job of knocking down their biggest needs in this draft as we look at their second-round selection, and he takes one of their most important needs off the board in cornerback. So let's take that off the board right now as they are able to get Byron Murphy. And quarterback wasn't a need. They made it a need by trading Josh Rosen, but it wasn't a need, so it's not on the list as they were fine at the quarterback position until they traded Josh Rosen. But as we look at Byron Murphy, let's talk about what he brings to the table. 5'11", a $190 for Byron Murphy, 4.55 40, and a 36.5-inch vert. So this is a guy that the Cardinals liked a lot. I'm not the biggest Byron Murphy fan. Saw a lot of zone coverage on tape. I'm very, very questionable in terms of my assessment of him, in terms of if he can play man consistently or not. I saw him play man a couple of times. It's not like he played just straight zone, but I'd say 90% of the tape that I watch, this guy, maybe even 95%, was this guy in zone coverage. You know, eyes on the quarterback, seeing and keeping everything in front of him, and making some plays now. Let's not act like he didn't make some plays, but a lot of zone coverage. And I'd like to see him, and with a guy like Patrick Peterson opposite, you'd like to see guys being able to man up. And I think they feel like Byron Murphy is versatile enough to kick inside and play slot. You're going to have to play the slot. You're going to have to play man-to-man coverage in the slot. That's just how it goes in this league. So in any event, an undersized cornerback that primarily played zone, his 4.55 at 5'11", 190 doesn't do him any favors. His lack of top-end speed coupled with tons of zone coverage leaves many to wonder just how good Byron Murphy is. While his movement skills seem to be solid, along with his football IQ, what is his true upside? That's the real question for me. I see a smart football player on tape. I see a guy that's very instinctual, that will come up and make plays on the football, will drive. I see a very competitive guy that wants to be around the football and be involved in the action. But what is his true upside? Again, I didn't see enough man-to-man to feel comfortable that, yeah, this guy's going to tear it up. I saw a guy that was very good in space, good fluid hips, could change directions, can break on the football, can drive, do all of the things you like. Again, but a lot of this was out of zone coverage, eyes on the quarterback, keying quarterback's eyes, and seeing what the quarterback was going to do and then responding to that. What happens when a guy gets a step, when you're a 4.55 guy and he gets a step on you and you're in trail technique? Do you panic with the football in the air? Is it PI time? Are you going to start grabbing? Or are you going to locate and contest? Are you going to find the football and make a play? I don't know. That's my biggest issue with Byron Murphy. I don't doubt that he can play man-to-man coverage. I just didn't see it a ton. So, anyway, the Cardinals, I think they love what this guy brings to the table. I think they envision him as a slot. But early on in the season with Patrick Peterson on the shelf, due to the suspension, maybe he'll have to play out wide for a little while until he comes back, because I think they envision their top three corners being Pat P on one side, Robert Alford on the other side, and Byron Murphy in the slot. And if that's what you're putting on the field, you have to feel damn good about that. And then you look at what you have at the safety position with a number of interchangeable parts. You really feel like you've got a chance to do some big things defensively if you're healthy and you've got all your guys on the field. So this is a solid acquisition here in the second round. 33rd selection overall, defensive back Byron Murphy out of Washington for me is So I said my comp for him, and I got to him on the draft, I didn't get to him on the draft wrap-up series, but my comp for Byron Murphy is Bernard Hargraves III out of Florida, the cornerback that was drafted in, I believe, the first round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 4 years ago now. Really solid football player. We questioned his top-end speed. He ran a sub 4.5 at the combine when he was coming into the draft, but I don't think anybody was ever sold on his long-distance speed. a guy that was a compact corner, but you loved his movement skills. Same thing can be said for Byron Murphy. And so I see a lot of the same qualities and intangibles in Vernon Hargreaves. As a matter of fact, the Buccaneers just picked up his fifth-year option, so that means they like what they've seen thus far out of Vernon Hargreaves, and maybe the Arizona Cardinals will feel the same way about Byron Murphy moving forward. So we go to the next pick in the second round, and this was a doozy right here. 62nd overall selection. Wide receiver out of UMass, Andy Isabella is the selection. So this pick here is one of those picks that I absolutely love in this Arizona Cardinals draft. Like, there were some people out there, and look, you may not agree with me here, but there were some people out there that had a problem with this selection, not with the player, but the timing of which he was selected. They thought this was too early for Andy Isabella. To me, it's never too early to get an athlete like Isabella in the slot. I think we tried to diminish the slot many years ago, and I think Tom Brady and Peyton Manning made the slot the new thing again. And when you can win immediately in the slot, and I think Wes Welker was that first guy that really made the slot with the smallest receiver that could win immediately a trend. It made it a in thing to get Wes Welker the football in New England, and that continued on in Denver with Peyton Manning. And then everyone was looking for their version of Wes Welker, the guy that could catch it, the Danny Amendola, the guy that could win immediately in the slot. And we've seen a bevy of these guys come around, Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder, these types of guys, undersized wide receivers in the slot, winning immediately and getting open and showing his numbers to the quarterback. I've often heard a wise man say that the thing that he heard from the top level quarterbacks, the elite quarterbacks in the league, the thing that they feel best about is a guy that can win immediately in the slot on third downs. And what's better for a young quarterback? What's better than, tight end is great. That's usually a young quarterback's best friend. But you want to know who else is his best friend? A slot guy that can win immediately on third downs. And that's what Andy Isabella is. And, I listened to Steve Keim talk about Isabella and his potential to play out wide as an X or a Z. I don't see it. I don't see him flanking out. I think he is a slot receiver, period. Like, I just don't see him being a guy that can play out wide on a consistent basis. But I won't limit him. I won't put him in a box. If they think he can play out wide, great. More power to him, and that gives him even more flexibility. But I think where his money is going to be made is in the slot. This guy is, and unlike past slots that have been great in this league, this guy has elite top-end speed. That's the difference. Wes Welker wasn't running a sub 4.5, okay? Wes Welker was like a 4.55 guy. Danny Amendola was like a 4.47 dude, but this is different right here, speed-wise. Speed! Andy Isabella knocks out a major need here. Let's take wide receiver off the draft board in terms of need for the Cardinals, as this is a tremendous pick here in the second round. And the Cardinals saw an opportunity to strike. They moved up to get him. They moved up to get him. And so I can't really blame them for this pick here. Slot nightmare, quick in and out of breaks, but has the long speed to be a vertical threat as well. Can make defenders miss and is crafty at getting open. Good hands and feisty in the run game despite his size. However, that same size will relegate Isabella to slot work only. I firmly believe that. I don't think he's a guy that you can play outside consistently. You may be able to move him around formationally every now and again just to give the defense a different look, to not have him be in the same spot so they can't key in on where he's going to be, because I think he's going to be a big-time nightmare, a mismatch nightmare in the slot. And it's going to force teams to maybe even have to try to bracket him at times with a defender inside and a defender outside. When guys have it going in the slot, that's generally what you do. But the thing that's so tough about slot receivers is, I like to say they have a four-way go. I know a lot of people like to say they have a three-way go. Well, they can go inside, they can go outside, they can go up the field. I also like to think they can come back to the football as well. So They can go anywhere, and that's what makes the slot so tough. You know, when you're outside as a boundary corner, you have the ability to use the out-of-bounds marker as another defender. So you have a little bit of help out there. There's no help in the slot. If you can't cover, you're going to get exposed. And Andy Isabella is a guy that I think can expose slot corners in this league consistently and win big with his speed. This is a guy that ran a 4.31 ex-track star in the state of Ohio. And this guy can run, all right? With a 36.5-inch vert, running a 4.31, this guy is a different breed at 5'9", 188. He's going to win, and he's going to win big. And that's going to really benefit a guy like Kyler Murray in his rookie season and really moving forward. He's got a young receiver he can grow with. They're going to make beautiful music, I believe, in Arizona in this air raid offense under Cliff Kingsbury. Here in the second round, 62nd pick overall, wide receiver out of Massachusetts, Andy Isabella. For me, you already know what this is.
Hits one high. Hits it deep. It is out of here.
So we move on to the next pick in the draft for the Arizona Cardinals. Before we do, I want to say my comp for Andy Isabella is Danny Amendola. Despite Amendola running like a 4.47 when he came into the league, Amendola was a lot faster than Wes Welker and a guy that if you slept on him, he could make you pay. You should know because you had to deal with Amendola for years in St. Louis as a Ram. And so you know what he brought to the table as a shifty slot that could hurt you. I think Isabella has the opportunity to be even better, more dynamic, more explosive with the football because of his long speed and his ability to take the top off the defense from the slot. A lot of these slot guys don't have elite speed. They have elite quickness. Isabella has both. That's going to make him a different breed in the slot in the upcoming 2019 season and possibly beyond. Third round, 65th pick overall, defensive lineman out of Boston College, Zach Allen is the selection. So Zach Allen is a guy that you pulled the trigger on here in the early stages of the third round, and I absolutely am amazed at the value you got here. I thought this is a guy that probably was going to be a third round pick, but as the draft unfolded and we saw 7 defensive linemen come off the board in the first round, and then we saw the edge rushers have a run on them in the first round as well. With all of that talent going, I thought he was going to be a second-round pick after seeing the way the board fell in the first round with all the defensive linemen and edge rushers taken early on in this draft. I was no doubt in my mind Zach Allen's coming off the board in the second round, and for him to still be there for you at the top of the third round, I thought it was tremendous value. This is one of my favorite players in this draft. He's so crafty. He just knows how to get the job done. My only question was, what position would he play at the next level? Because he was kind of a tweener, a guy that was a big-time production guy at Boston College as a defensive end. They would kick him inside in some sub-packages to play the 3-tech, but he was more of a base 4-3 end at BC. What was he going to play at the next level? That was my biggest question. And so here's my breakdown of him. 6'4", 281 pounds, 35-inch arms. You hear that? 35-inch arms, and the guy knows how to use them. A base 4-3 defensive end or a 4-tech trapped in a base 3-4 defensive end or a 5-tech's body. The skill set here for Zach Allen is ridiculous. Has great hand usage, a bevy of moves, and quickness to boot. His biggest issue at 281 pounds is where do you play him? Is he a 3-tech that you kick inside? Is he a 5-tech in a base 3-4 defense? Or do you sacrifice legit speed for power and leave him as a base 4-3 defensive end? And what I mean by that is, do you take away the ability to have elite speed off the edge? And because that's not what Zach Allen is. He's not an elite speed, twitchy guy. What he is a brute force power and a guy with a ton of moves. A nice move Rolodex that will allow him to get to the quarterback. He can bull rush you. He can use some quickness, but he doesn't have elite speed. He's not Chandler Jones with that first step and length to get to the quarterback, although he does have extreme length, as I mentioned. So do you leave him at base end in a 4-3 defense? That's the dilemma. With 35-inch arms and the addition of a few pounds, a move inside could be deadly for short-armed interior offensive linemen. One thing's for sure, whatever the Arizona Cardinals decide to do with him, there's definitely talent here, for sure. To me, there's no doubt about it. If you asked him to drop a few pounds and go down to, let's say, 275, 272, and asked him to be an edge rusher, I'd be fine with that, and I think he would excel in that role. If you said, hey, we think your body type could stand and gain a couple of pounds, and you would still be the same player that you are, how about you bulk up to 295 and play base, defensive end for us, or kick inside, play nose for us, or three technique. That's what I mean. Play the three tech for us as a 292-pound defensive lineman. I think he could do that and really excel there. There aren't many offensive linemen on the interior with 35-inch arms that will be able to deal with what this guy brings to the table. He's quick. He's crafty. I saw latch and snatch. I saw spin moves. I saw swims. I saw rips. I saw dips. I saw everything. I mean, this guy can do it all from a pass rushing standpoint. So the beauty here is you're not just getting an elite run defender, which he is at this point. You're also getting a guy that can bag quarterbacks at a high level. And so I told you needed more presence along the defensive line and edge rusher. You could easily make the case that this guy could take away two needs, edge rusher and defensive line. We'll just pick one here, and we'll take defensive line off of your needs list here in the third round with Zach Allen. I think this is a tremendous pick with tremendous value here. Love this selection here in the third round. And so in the third round, 65th overall selection, defensive lineman out of Boston College, Zach Allen for me is so my comp for him is a guy that a lot of you may not know. You have to go back to yesteryear to remember Patrick Kearney of the Atlanta Falcons, a guy that was a huge 4-3 base defensive end, big arms, physical guy, but could get to the quarterback. Wasn't elite in terms of speed, but was a guy that knew how to get to the quarterback and a lot of times used brute force, which to do so. I see a lot of the same traits in Zach Allen, especially if he were to slim down just a bit and play defensive end, which is what Kearney did. But Kearney could have easily put on some weight and kicked inside if he wanted to. He was a big-time pass rusher for the Falcons for years. I think Zach Allen could be the same for the Arizona Cardinals moving forward. As we move to the fourth round, 103rd selection overall, wide receiver out of Iowa State, Hakeem Butler is the pick. So remember at the top of this breakdown, I talked about the Cardinals needing to revamp the wide receiver position. And I talked about them getting Kevin White and giving him an opportunity. And you still got Christian Kirk, who's going to be a year better in year two and showed some flashes in year one. You still got Larry Legend. But when you look around at this roster, I thought you just needed to add more stuff at the receiver position. You did it earlier with Andy Isabella. You're doing it again here. And I absolutely think that this was a steal, period. I had this guy rated as like my number 4 or 5 receiver. I think he was the 5th rated receiver in this draft for me, 5th or 6th, somewhere in that neighborhood. But in the 4th round, and it was a funny draft with the receiver position because I thought there was going to be a run late 2nd round into the 3rd, and there really wasn't. There were 2 receivers taken in the 1st round, and then you didn't have another receiver taken until the mid-40s, early 50s with A.J. Brown to the Titans. And so there was a huge gap there, and it allowed a lot of receivers to get pushed down the board. And here's one of those guys in Hakeem Butler that I thought easily was a 2nd-round pick in this draft, but I thought worst-case scenario, he's not falling below the 3rd round. There's too much upside here with this guy. I'm not going to break him down. I've already done that in the Draft Prospects 101 series, so if you're looking for a thorough breakdown with film included, go to the Draft Prospects 101 series and find Hakeem Butler's breakdown prior to the draft. But I will tell you this, at 6'5", 227 pounds, you won't find many wide receivers coming into the draft with the skill set of a Hakeem Butler. Size, speed, length, ability to go high point the football. This guy has a little bit of everything, and there's a ton of upside. There are some drops. There are some questions about his hands and the consistency of them. But when you talk about a potential number 1, it's rare that you get a guy that you think can be a potential number 1 wide receiver moving forward, because I don't think Christian Kirk is a number 1 wide receiver in this league. I think he's going to be an excellent, one of the better number 2s. you still, to me, need a number one. You don't generally get guys that can be a number one in the 4th round, but that's what you could have gotten here in the 4th round in Hakeem Butler. This is a steal, folks. There's no other way to say it. I comp him to a guy that I thought wasn't going to be all that great coming into the league. A couple of years ago, the Lions selected Kenny Golladay out of Northern Illinois, and I'm like, this guy isn't all of that. Why did they do this here? And I just didn't see it. He had size, he had speed, he had playmaking ability, but it just didn't look all that great. And he went to a smaller school, so I think he did dominate the competition, but I just didn't see an extraordinary athlete there. I was wrong. Kenny Golladay has come in and ripped it up. He had 1,000 yards receiving for the Lions last year. He looks like he's got star written all over him. I think that you could potentially be getting that here. A guy that you drafted in the mid-rounds, which Kenny Golladay was drafted for the Lions, and he turned out to be a stud. I think you could be getting the same thing here. Kenny Golladay looks the part of a number one. Hakeem Butler could be a number one for you here in this draft. This is an extraordinary value pick here for me. 4th round, 103rd overall selection, wide receiver out of Iowa State. Hakeem Butler for me is.
Hits one high. Hits it deep. It is out of here.
So as of right now, as you can see, Steve Keim is absolutely killing this draft. I mean, he's murdering this draft, but he's not done yet. All right, we're halfway through this draft essentially, and he's still got more value to acquire and add to this roster as we go to the 5th round, 139th overall selection. Defensive back out of Alabama, Deonte Thompson is the pick. So my biggest question coming into the 5th round was, what the hell is Deonte Thompson still doing here? Why is he still on the board as we entered the 5th round? That was one of the biggest storylines going into the 5th round, is what is going on with Alabama safety Deonte Thompson? Now, Nick Saban has all along said to players, if you're not going to be drafted early on in the 1st round or 2nd round, then don't come out into the draft. He's long said that about his players. He doesn't endorse guys leaving school early if they're not going to receive a high draft grade from the draft advisory board. And maybe Deonte Thompson did receive a high grade, a 2nd round grade, a 1st round grade, because remember, for much of this process, Deonte Thompson was thought to be the best safety at his position. All right, so the best at his position, at the safety position, and a 1st round, a lock, surefire 1st round pick. At the end of last year, going into the college football season, he was the consensus number 1 safety. Halfway through the college football season, nothing had changed. He was still the best safety that you could get. And the second half of his season, junior season at Alabama, wasn't the greatest. So it exposed some flaws. There was a rumor about him having a degenerative knee injury that could progressively get worse throughout his career. Again, I don't know the validity of that. I just know that in the 5th round, an Alabama defensive back, which is rare, one that is highly touted, was still sitting there. Every time an Alabama defensive back comes out, whether it's corner or safety, because he's being coached by Nick Saban in that defense, he generally comes off the board in the first 2 rounds, 3rd round at worst. You generally don't see any kind of highly regarded defensive back out of Alabama be drafted any lower than the 3rd round. And this is a guy that a lot of people liked his length, his athleticism, his ability to come up and be physical. There were a lot of good qualities here, and he was still around in the 5th round, which made no sense. Let me just clarify something. This guy was the 13th safety taken in this draft. So you're telling me there were 12 safeties better than Deonte Thompson in this draft? I highly doubt that. Seriously. There were some really good safeties in this draft, and I thought this was a deep safety class. And you're telling me that there were 12 safeties better than Deonte Thompson? I'm just not buying it. I'm just not. So anyway, 6'1", 195 pounds. A torn ligament stopped Thompson from working out at the combine and probably contributed to his slide. With no time to associate with tape and a back end of his final season littered with mistakes, Deonte Thompson's stop simply dropped. He's long. The athleticism and speed with or without the time is apparent, but his slender frame and undisciplined nature sent many teams in a different direction as 12 safeties were taken ahead of him. there was a rumor, of a degenerative knee injury that I really don't know the validity of, but whatever the case, the Cardinals may have gotten a steal in the 5th round with Deonte Thompson. This, to me, was a tremendous pick here. I didn't see this guy being here for the Arizona Cardinals to select. I didn't. And the fact that he was available here in the 5th round at a position of need that I believe was something that you could have added to your football team, this is tremendous value. I thought there were about 4, maybe 5 safeties that were taken ahead of him that you could definitely question as to why this guy went before him. You know, I'm not going to continue to bring up the Seahawks, but they are in your division. So if I could throw a little shade their way, why not, right? Marquise Blair in the 2nd round. And look, I haven't watched tape on Marquise Blair, so I probably should stop speaking that man's name and stop talking about him as if I know what this guy is. But Marquise Blair, it seemed a lot early, a little too rich for my blood for him in the 2nd round. We'll see. I could be wrong. He could have been worth that 2nd round pick. But when I look at a guy like Deonte Thompson, you look at where he came from, you look at who he was coached by, you look at the skill set, there are a lot of people that also question, with his frame, can he withstand the NFL rigors? This guy's, he's a flimsy, tall, lanky guy. I think he can put on some more weight. He's going to have to put on some more weight, especially with the way he plays the game. He's a physical football player. And if he's going to continue with that physicality moving forward, which I think is a part of who he is and is in his DNA makeup, he's going to have to put on some weight, or else he's going to be a guy that's often injured with the physical nature in which he plays the game. But I love this pick. I think the comp for him is Marcus Williams, a guy that the Saints took in the 3rd round, or I think it might have even been the 2nd round of the NFL draft a couple of years ago. He's most famous for the Minneapolis Miracle being on his watch. He was the guy that missed the tackle on that play that allowed Stephon Diggs to score the touchdown. That's what he's most notably remembered for notoriously right now. But the guy's a good football player. Like what he brings to the table. I see a lot of the same qualities here in Deonte Thompson, a guy that's not afraid to come up and hit you, but can make plays on the football as well. Has that cornerback type of frame at the safety position. He's got to put on some more weight, but this is a guy that I think you got to steal on in the 5th round. 139th overall selection, defensive back out of Alabama, Deonte Thompson. Let's take him off the board quickly in terms of safety being a need. You take care of that. Deonte Thompson for me is. So we go to the 6th round now, 174th pick overall. A wide receiver out of Fresno State, Keyshawn Johnson is the pick. So I talked about revamping and overhauling the wide receiver position. As you can see, if you're going to have an air raid attack, you know what this draft kind of reminds me a lot of? The first year of Sean McVay in Los Angeles with the Rams. Remember, he came in, and that first year he drafted about 3 receivers, a couple of tight ends or so, and you could see the makings of what he was going to do with that football team from an offensive standpoint. They went out in free agency. They addressed a couple of needs there. Did the Rams went out and got Robert Woods and added some guys, and then they went out and got a bunch of wide receivers that they felt like could really help them. And it changed the fortunes of their football team very quickly, along with the maturation and quick turnaround of Jared Goff under Sean McVay. You're hoping for the same thing here, except Kyle Murray is coming in with Cliff Kingsbury instead of a guy already in the league 1 year and having that coach come in and turn him around. But I told you needed help at receiver, and this draft is proving that. You needed to add bodies at the receiver positions, and not just bodies, talented football players. And you think you might have gotten one here in the 6th round, Keyshawn Johnson. Look, Keyshawn Johnson is a guy that went to Fresno State, 6'1", 201 pounds. He reminded me of another receiver. Now, I'm not comping him to this guy, but he reminds me a lot of this receiver that went to Fresno State that's playing in the league, a number 1 receiver. He's a stud in Devontae Adams. But because they went to Fresno and they were utilized the same way in that offensive scheme, it comes into question just because Devontae Adams had a bigger body, bigger frame, and he also was a better athlete than that of Keyshawn Johnson. So you could see the characteristics of why Davante Adams was a second-round pick to Green Bay. And I told everyone then, if you go back and watch, that you had effed up essentially. You can't give Aaron Rodgers that kind of talent at the receiver position and not expect him to exploit NFL defenses. And I don't feel the same way about Keyshawn Johnson, but there are a lot of similarities because of how he was used at Fresno State. All right, so everything about Keyshawn Johnson reminds me of Davante Adams coming out of Fresno State. Volume numbers because of prolific underneath passing game, not particularly explosive, but fast enough. Good NFL wide receiver size, excellent route running ability when he actually does catch the football beyond the line of scrimmage. Strong hands, although he's not much of a blocker. He can he can move around outside in the slot, has solid run after the catch. So there's some versatility here as to where you can play him. He played all over the place at Fresno. Not nearly as imposing a receiver in terms of a body stature and ability. You know, Davante Adams had a 40-plus inch vertical coming out of Fresno. He's not the same type of athlete and same type of body. And Davante Adams was more of a 6'2", 215 type guy. You're talking about a guy that's barely 200 pounds here at 6'1", but there's something to explore here with Keyshawn Johnson. That's the way I feel. I think he's a guy that brings a lot of things to the table, and there's a lot to like here with him. I think that you have something, and all these receivers that you're bringing in, what does that say about Williams, your receiver out of Grambling State that you drafted a couple of years ago? He could be easily on the chopping block. Now, to me, Cliff Kingsbury strikes me as a guy that is not opposed to keeping 6 wide receivers, right? And so it's going to be a lot of competition. That's what you want. You didn't have enough competition at receiver last year. There were too many roster spots available at receiver. You're not going to have that kind of flexibility this year. Somebody that is going to make another NFL roster is going to get cut at some point this year for this Arizona Cardinals team at the receiver position. Because I told you, I really think you're going to give the ex-Chicago Bears wide receiver another chance to make an NFL roster. And so I think he's going to have a legitimate shot. Obviously, you got Larry. Obviously, you got Christian Kirk. That's 2 spots for sure. I don't want to lump in Kevin White with those guys as a lock to make the roster, but I think he's going to make the roster. I'm just going to tell you my opinion. I think he's going to make the roster if he stays healthy. That's been a bugaboo of his as well, staying healthy. He was healthy last year, just didn't get a lot of reps. I think he's going to make your roster if he's healthy. Then you look at 3 receivers that you drafted. You drafted Eddie Isabella, you drafted Hakeem Butler, and you drafted Keyshawn Johnson. I think they're all going to make your roster. That's 6 receivers right there. What does that say about Williams? I don't know. I don't know what that means for him. But there's going to be competition. Keyshawn Johnson could be the odd man out. Who's to say? I think he's going to make your team. You drafted him, and he's your guy. I think he's going to make your football team. But I see my comp for him is Taywan Taylor, a guy that was drafted by the Tennessee Titans, I believe in the second round, if not second, third for sure. But I think it was the second round. A guy that did some really good things at Western Kentucky and hasn't really been as good as I thought he was going to be at the next level. But I wasn't all that high on him, but I thought he had some really good qualities, some things that you could get excited about. I feel the same way about Keyshawn Johnson. He's got some things you can get excited about. He's got some versatility. He's got some playmaking ability. He does some really good things with the football in his hands after the catch. But a lot of underneath stuff, which is the same thing could be said for Taywan Taylor coming out of Western Kentucky. But I think there is something here, as I mentioned before, and I think this is a solid pick here in the 6th round. 174th pick overall. Wide receiver out of Fresno State. Keyshawn Johnson, for me, is so we stay in the 6th round, 179th overall selection. Offensive lineman out of Georgia, Lamont Gilyard is the selection. This was a hell of a pick. You know, generally in the 6th round, you're not going to get tremendous value. You got tremendous value here, and generally you're not getting starters in the 6th round either. I think you might have gotten a starter here in the 6th round. Now, the beauty of the offensive line on the interior is that you can find these guys anywhere. You can find them in the 1st round. You can find them in the 2nd round. You can find them in the 5th round. You can find them in the 6th round. You can find them as undrafted guys. We've seen undrafted offensive linemen become Pro Bowlers and command huge contracts. It's rare at other positions. It's not as rare on the interior offensive line because if you can coach them up, you can find talent in the 6th, in the 5th, in the 7th rounds. I've seen guys become starters and damn good ones in this league as interior offensive linemen. And I think you might have found one here in Lamont Gilyard out of Georgia. Let's take offensive line off the board. It took you a while to get to one of your biggest need positions along the offensive line, but your offensive line was horrible last year. This guy's going to help your offensive line, I think. And it wouldn't shock me if he started year one. It just wouldn't shock me. The guy played at a very high level in the toughest conference in all of collegiate sports. I think he held his own against some of the best college football had to offer, including Quinnen Williams over the last 2 years, and Deron Payne, all those guys. He's seen them all. Jonathan Allen, he's seen them all. And I thought he's been really good for the Georgia Bulldogs over the last 2 years at the center position. Also played guard as well. Let's get into what Lamont Gilyard brings to the table. 6'3", 305, 33-inch arms, 42 consecutive starts at Georgia. So again, a lot of experience here. 29 of those starts coming at center, 13 coming at guard. And remember, this is a guy that didn't miss a start. You know, once he got into the lineup, this guy played straight through, didn't miss a start. So always, best ability is availability. This guy is available week in, week out. Toughness, grit, and a by any means necessary approach really personifies Lamont Gilyard. A snap in, snap out grinder. Gilyard does a great job of not only initiating contact, but staying engaged, which is huge along the offensive line. Has good snap to set, also in pass pro, and also tremendous job of looking for work. Can't stand an interior offensive lineman, especially a center, because on every single snap, you're not going to have a guy lined up over top of you as a center. So there may be 4 linemen in terms of an even front that the defense is putting in front of you as an offensive line, and you may not have a guy. There may be 2 interior defensive linemen lined up over the guards, and then the 2 ends over the tackles, and you have nobody to block. Head on a swivel. All right, make sure there's no green dog, no late blitzer coming. Make sure that you pick up any immediate pressure up the middle, up that A-gap. But if there's nothing coming and you identify that early, head on a swivel, go help somebody. Go be a part of the play. He's a guy that goes looking for work. I love that. In the run game, sometimes he throws his technique to the wind, but all in the name of salvaging a rep. He's not always going to win initially, and it's not always going to be pretty with Lamont Gilyard, but he always finds a way, it seems like, to get his job done. While speed and quickness across his face or elite length can prove problematic at times for Gilyard, and we did see that on tape. Quinnen Williams is a great example, but I thought he held his own. He lost some matches and some reps, but he won some battles against Quinnen Williams as well. Gilyard, to me, is an NFL caliber starting offensive lineman. That's just how I feel, that you got one in the 6th round. My comp for him is an ex-Georgia Bulldog, so you kind of see the similarities: size, length, toughness, grit, all those things. And that's what Georgia values with interior offensive linemen. My comp for him is Ben Jones, guy that was drafted by the Houston Texans, has since moved on to or it might be the other way around, was drafted by the Titans and has since moved on to the Texans. I think it's the other way around. Drafted by the Titans, or drafted by the Texans, then went to the Titans in free agency. Either way, he's in the AFC South Division and is a really solid NFL center. And I think you could have the same thing here with Lamont Gilyard in the 6th round, 179th overall selection. Offensive lineman out of Georgia, and again, gives you versatility. Can play center or guard. Lamont Gilyard, for me, is all right. So I talked about you giving the offensive line some help in this draft. You just did that. You did it again here in the 7th round. This is more of a developmental guy, if you ask me. 248th pick in the 7th round. Offensive lineman out of Morgan State, Joshua Miles, is the selection. So, quickly on Miles, 6'5", 314, 36-inch arms, 36-inch vert. I mean, those are some tools with which any offensive line coach would love to work with. You get excited when you get a guy with this size, this length, and this kind of athleticism. So he's got a lot of things that offensive lineman coaches are going to really be excited to work with. That being said, he's extremely raw, played in a small conference in the MEAC, didn't play against great competition. I watched him in one game versus Howard. I was not blown away by what I saw, but I do see why they draft him here and take a flyer on him in the 7th round, because, again, you can't teach what he has at 6'5", 314, 36-inch arms, and 36-inch vert. So he does have some movement skills, but is extremely raw. Probably can play guard as well. So there's some things that you can play around with here to see what fits best with this guy. But I don't foresee him making a roster. I don't. Unless there is a dramatic change with him throughout camp and in these OTAs and minis and all that stuff. Unless there's serious growth and they get to a point where they're comfortable with him being a backup offensive lineman, which I don't see early on. I don't see him making a roster, but this is a nice developmental pick in the 7th round. That's what you do. You take guys that you want to develop, and I think that's what they did here. Big, long, developmental offensive lineman with physical traits that coaches get excited over. Solid movement skills, ridiculous length, but poor technique and no concept of how to use his advantages to consistently win snap after snap. Won't make the roster initially unless drastic changes are made, but over time he could be a quality offensive lineman. So when I say doesn't understand how to use his advantages to his benefit, you're talking about a guy with 36-inch arms, yet a lot of plays, his body is contacting the body of the defensive lineman. That shouldn't be the case if you've got 36-inch arms. You should be keeping that defensive lineman at bay. He shouldn't get near you with 36-inch arms. You should be locking those things. Lock him up. Lock him up. Lock his ass up with 36-inch arms. You should be Lil Broing him, where you've got your hand on his head and he's swinging his arms and he can't touch you with 36-inch arms. Instead, he's chest to chest, pad to pad with guys, and I'm like, bruh, that's not the way to win with 36-inch arms. It's not aesthetically pleasing. A lot of misses with blocks. A lot of times he's allowing guys into his chest with 36-inch arms. That just doesn't make any sense. But again, he's got some work to do, but there's a lot of measurables and things to work with here in the 7th round, 248th overall selection. Offensive lineman out of Morgan State. Joshua Miles for me is my comp for Joshua Miles is TJ Clemmings, a guy that was a very good athlete coming out of Pitt. As a matter of fact, the Minnesota Vikings thought they had struck gold with him, I believe, either in the 1st or 2nd round. I think it was the 2nd round of the NFL draft about 4 years ago. They thought they had found their future left tackle, and TJ Clemmings turned out to be a bust of epic proportions. It just never really seemed to get down the fundamentals and technique of a bigger, athletically gifted tackle. He had 35-inch arms. He was an ex-basketball player, so there was athleticism oozing out of every nook and cranny with TJ Clemmings, and he just never seemed to get it. He's bouncing around now on NFL rosters as we speak. And Joshua Miles reminds me a lot of TJ Clemmings, just a guy that you accept he's not going to be a 2nd-round pick that's going to get an opportunity to make the roster right away. He's going to have to earn a roster spot in Arizona if he wants an NFL career. And finally, we end this draft. Very next pick in the 7th round, 249th overall. Defensive lineman out of Temple, Michael Dogbe is the pick. I think I spoke too soon when I said wrapping up this draft. When you've got 11 picks, you tend to forget about a pick or two. And so this is the penultimate pick for the Arizona Cardinals in this draft, as Michael Dogbe is a 6'3", 284-pound defensive lineman. Now, I'm going to, for the sake of argument, call him an edge rusher. But like I said, earlier in the draft with Zach Allen, and to me, these are two comparable guys size-wise. They're tweeners. You could argue which one is which. They could both be edge rushers. They could both be interior defensive linemen. I said I was going to split the difference. One's going to be one. One's going to be the other. It doesn't really matter at this point. I think you addressed edge rusher with Allen earlier. And so I just split it up. You addressed, to me, getting to the quarterback, which is the key And Michael Dogbe is a guy that has a chance to make your roster. This guy came to Temple with a bunch of hoopla. He was a highly sought-after defensive lineman. This is a guy that had over 100 tackles, 40 of them for loss, and 22 and a half sacks in his final year in high school. That was 1 year in high school, which is insane. All right. So he came in with a lot of expectations, did not live up to those expectations, but did show a flash at the very end of his collegiate career, which got people excited, and I think it's ultimately what got him drafted here in the 7th round. 4'9", 440 for a guy that's damn near 300 pounds, so that tells you the athleticism here at 284. 34 reps of 2 1/4, so you see the strength also with Michael Dogbe. An intriguing defensive line prospect, similar to Zach Allen. What is he exactly? All right. While showing the quickness to be a one-gap penetrator up the field, Dogbe also displays an array of other moves to try to get to the quarterback. Although he didn't live up to his hype coming out of high school, Dogbe's senior season and workouts enticed the Cards to take a chance on him here in the 7th round. I see some upside with Michael Dogbe. I don't see a necessarily dynamic player like Zach Allen is. To me, Zach Allen's a dynamic football player. I don't see that necessarily with Michael Dogbe, but I do see a quality NFL body with the ability to be a rotational depth defensive lineman that can come in and help you. And so I think this is a 7th round pick that has a legitimate shot to make your roster. And it wouldn't shock me if he did. If he doesn't, I think he's a guy that would be a candidate for your practice squad and a guy that could down the road easily be pulled up or make your roster next year. In any event, I like this 7th round pick. 249th overall selection. Defensive lineman out of Temple. Michael Dogbe, for me, is and I apologize, that was supposed to be a double, not a single. So for those of you out there watching, that was supposed to be a double. Let me correct that error. That was not a single. That was supposed to be a double. So we wrap up the draft. Now we finally wrap up the draft with the final pick in the draft. And before we do that, also, the comp for Michael Dogbe for me is a guy that was drafted by the Green Bay Packers about 3 years ago in the mid to late rounds out of Northwestern in Dean Lowry. I love Dean Lowry coming out of Northwestern. Thought he was going to be a fabulous player for the Packers. And he's pretty much lived up to my expectations. They like him in Green Bay. I like him. I liked him coming out of Northwestern. Big body guy, was physical at the point of attack, could get to the quarterback, make some plays in the backfield. I think Michael Dogbe has all of those capabilities. And so he's a double, not a single. As I mentioned, that was a mistake. But let's wrap up this draft. 7th round, 254th overall selection. Mr. Irrelevant, even. UCLA tight end Caleb Wilson is the pick. All right, so Caleb Wilson is a guy that was intriguing back in 2017. If you remember the Josh Rosen game against Texas A&M, first game of the season, the miraculous comeback. The guy that was the star of the show, other than Josh Rosen, was Caleb Wilson. This is a guy that, in that comeback, probably had every bit of 9 catches in that comeback and was just as big a part of the comeback as anybody. And so that's when he got on my radar. Like, okay, this guy's pretty talented. He got injured throughout the course of that year, and it cut his season short, and that was really disappointing. He came back in 2018, put up some monster numbers for a very bad UCLA football team. Not a lot of weaponry. He was probably the best weapon they had, as a matter of fact. They struggled to win football games under a new head coach, under a new quarterback, obviously, with Josh Rosen coming to the league. And so they just weren't a very good outfit in 2018. But he was one of the shining stars of that football team. Over 900 yards receiving, a ton of catches. He did some really good things for them. But when you watch him at the combine, he ran a 4.56, which is great. He fell right in line with the athletes in the tight end position in this draft. But when you watch him on tape, he's not a great blocker. First of all, he's got a small frame. He's listed at 240. That's what he weighed in at the combine. This guy was playing tight end probably at a legit 235 pounds. So that's the first problem. He's got a lot of frame building to do, if that's even possible. I look at his frame. there's no way he shouldn't be able to put on an additional 10 pounds. Why he hasn't already done that? He should have done that in college. He should have put on more weight. And I don't know what he started out as. He could have come to college as a 215-pound tight end. And this guy was an ex-quarterback. So let's keep all of this in perspective. This guy didn't come to college to play tight end initially. He came to play quarterback. He came from high school as a quarterback. So, yes, he probably had a smaller frame. He's probably did a lot to build his frame into a 240-pound frame. But he's got some ways to go. He doesn't block well. You can see the lack of physicality with him because he used to play a position that didn't require him to take a bunch of hits. So you can see the lack of physicality in the run game. He's not a great blocker. The effort sometimes isn't there, even though I think he does try. He's more of an H-back, if you ask me, than a tight end. And so you look at a guy that doesn't have the greatest movement skills in terms of quickness, in and out of breaks, change of direction. It's not explosive. I think he's a guy that in a straight line can run, as you see, 4, 5, 6. You know, you run him on a wheel up the sideline, you run him on a seam ball or a go ball. He can run straight in the line. But I don't think he runs exceptional routes. I don't think he separates all that great. I think he runs the contact when guys are in zone coverage. When you're running in zone, you should be looking to avoid guys, not run into them. Even though he's still getting open and catching the football, I think there are some tweaks that could be made there. So there's a lot of things that he needs cleaning up. But he's an athlete. You know, in that 6'4", 240, running the 4, 5, 6, there may be a place in the league for him. I comp him to Clay Harbor, a guy that was in the league for a number of years, hanging on as a tight end that was undersized, that could run, do a little something, could block a little bit. I could see the same thing for Caleb Wilson. He could be a guy that bounces around this league as a third tight end option. If he remakes himself into a bigger tight end that's athletically gifted, that can do some things in the run game a little bit, as a move tight end, maybe as an H-back, maybe he could be something in this league. And I think that's why they took a flyer here on him in the 7th round, because they could use some help. Even though they got Max Williams in the offseason to help bolster their tight end position, they like what they have at tight end. They're adding him. Ricky Seals-Jones is there. You add him to the mix and see what you get. And this is one of those situations where you just take a dart, you throw it at the board, and you see if it sticks. So 7th round, 254th overall selection, Mr. Irrelevant, tight end out of UCLA. Caleb Wilson, for me, to wrap up this Cardinals draft is so that's the Arizona Cardinals 2019 NFL draft, and what a stellar draft it was. It was 11 picks long, a ton of value throughout. This is a foundation-changing building draft here. And I know Steve Keim needed this one in the worst way. Again, it's on paper. We don't know how these players are going to pan out, but just looking at this draft and the upside here with a new coach coming in, with all the talent that you added on the offensive side of the football, you got to be excited about what the Cardinals did here. You added some defensive help. You added some offensive help. You revamped and reshaped this roster. You feel good about the building blocks that you may have put in here. These are some pillars here, potentially, in this draft. I mean, Kyler Murray is a pillar. If he is what you think he is a building block moving forward. I think you got a steal in the 4th round in Hakeem Butler. Same thing with Andy Isabella. I know some people thought it was early for Isabella. I didn't. I thought that was tremendous value in the 2nd round, late 2nd, pretty much 3rd round. Getting a guy that is going to win immediately in the slot. I think that's a great selection there. I love Zach Allen in the 3rd round. We'll see what Byron Murphy is in the 2nd. There's a Lamont Gilyard, to me, is a steal in the 6th round. I think you got some stuff here. I really do. Deonte Thompson, 5th round pick, could easily be a steal in the crown jewel of this draft. We'll see. Love what you did in this draft. 11 picks, a lot of value. You saw every need taken off the board that I thought the Cardinals had coming into this draft. So you did yeoman-like work there. Let's take a look at the score that they were able to accomplish in their 2019 NFL draft. So that's the Arizona Cardinals 2019 NFL Draft wrap-up. Look, I'm your man, Louie Tee. Thank you for joining me. If it's not your man, T, it's not the best NFL coverage. It could be. Remember, if you haven't already done so, what are you waiting on? Subscribe to the Louie Tee Network for more great content. I break down all 32 teams in the National Football League. So don't you go anywhere. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss a thing here on the Louie Tee Network. And also, check out the Louie Tee Network podcast, available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, TuneIn, iTunes, also Spotify, all of that good stuff. LouieTeeNetwork.net, available on the website. Check out the Louie Tee Network podcast. It's great stuff. I'm your man, Louie Tee, signing off. Until next time, you guys have a good one.